Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This topic was scheduled for last Sunday, I believe, and we had to postpone. And again tonight, we do not have enough people for a lecture. So what I'll do is to give some brief remarks, and then we have a discussion session, which could be as valuable as a lecture. Okay. I lectured on this topic the last time, you won't believe it, 30 years ago in Lahore in Pakistan at the request of Dr. Israr Ahmad. I spoke on the philosophy of gender in Islam. But that was 1996. So that was 30 years ago. And I have not returned to the topic in 30 years. And when we go to the philosophy of gender in Islam, the masculine and the feminine, the first place we'll go to is Surah Al-Hujurat, where Allah says that I created you from a male and a female. And hence there are only two genders in Islam. Having established that there are only two genders in Islam, we can then proceed to see what's happening in the world today. Where in the United States, for example, under Biden, there was an effort to dilute the subject and give us more than two genders. And there was a backlash. And when Trump became president, Trump made it plain and clear there are only two genders. He removed what was done by his predecessor, Biden. But this is still continuing in Europe. And we have to be careful to ensure that we do not allow this false philosophy of gender to come upon us. The Pakistan National Assembly adopted a resolution declaring that there were more than two genders. Pakistan National Assembly. Okay? That's how dangerous it is. They're having gone to Surah Al-Hujurat, we go then to Surah Al-Layl, where Allah speaks about that He created the night and the day. And in the same way that He created the night and the day, so too did He create the male and the female. The night and the day are not equal to each other. No one is so stupid or foolish to put an equal sign between night and day. Rather, night and day complement each other. They have a complementary relationship. So this feminist revolution, which now seeks equal rights for women, that men and women are equal, is misguided. When you study Surah Al-Layl, you must look carefully to see how the night and the day interact each other. We don't have the time to do that tonight. In a full-length lecture, yes. How do the night and the day interact with each other? And you will locate the relationship between the male and the female. That when the day is coming to an end, and the day is approaching the night, the sky is painted in colors, the sunset. This is the attraction between the male and the female. If that attraction is diminished or destroyed, then the balance is drawn and society will collapse. So the attraction between the male, of the male for the female, that attraction must always be maintained at the strongest possible level. But that attraction will begin to wane when men and women mix and are constantly interacting with each other. The attraction remains powerful when they're kept apart. And that's why in the system of education, you have boys and girls together in the primary school, but not in the secondary school, and not in the college, because you want to keep them apart from each other in order to keep the attraction of the male for the female at fever pitch. And then when the night embraces the day at sunset, then the whole night is spent. And now look what happens at dawn. At sunset it was a ball of fire, but at dawn is one ray of light, and then a second and a third, as though the night is holding the day, doesn't want the day to leave, and the day is struggling to leave, slowly, slowly, slowly. This is the attraction and the intensity of the desire of the female for the male. So this is a subject we should devote attention to. And there are so many verses of the Quran concerning the rotation of night and day. Allah spends many, many verses on this, using different language. It's a minefield for a researcher, the rotation of night and day. And then we will turn now to the verse where Allah says, "Inna sa'yakum lashatta," that you are functionally different, and therefore is given to the male certain functions to perform, and to the female certain functions to perform. What are those functions? وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا. We gave you the day to work and to earn your livelihood, to struggle, to plant. And we gave you the night as a covering, as libas. And so, if the night starts working out in the day, the night goes and pursues a career, then the night will no longer be night. And women will lose their femininity. When the Soviet Union collapsed and East Germany was now united with West Germany, this happened 50 years ago, 55 years ago. West German men were hungry for East German women because the West German women had become so westernized that they were losing their femininity, whereas the East German women had not lost their femininity so much. I went to the west coast of United States, Vancouver, San Francisco, Seattle, and I've forgotten the names now of the other cities. And I found a huge number of American men married to Indonesian women. Why? Because the Indonesian woman had preserved her femininity, whereas the American woman had become so masculine. And so here is Surah Al-Layl informing us about the functional difference between the male and the female. The Quran then goes on in Surah An-Nisa, to declare that it is the function of men not only to maintain women, but to guard and protect them. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Today's women say, we don't need a man to defend us. We don't need a man to maintain us. We are independent. We can work and earn our own livelihood. That's the modern age. Yes, of course, a woman is entitled to earn her livelihood on the condition that she does not abandon a functional role as a woman, as a mother, and as a wife. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was a businesswoman, but she gave birth to 7 children for Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And she was a full-time mother. And what we have today is the functional role of the male and the female being attacked by the modern feminist revolution. That, again, is a fascinating subject to be taken up. And finally, Allah speaks in Surah Al Imran, and He speaks about the widows and orphans from those who die in battle. The Battle of Badr had taken place, the Battle of Uhud had taken place. And we had suffered significant losses. And the budget of zakat could not manage maintaining all those widows and all those orphans. So what to do? How to solve the problem of so many widows and so many orphans with a budget of zakat unable to finance it? So Allah speaks in Surah Al Imran, and He says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. If you fear that you are unable to fulfill your collective responsibility to the orphans, your collective responsibility as a society, meaning that as a community, if you do not fulfill your duty to the orphans and to the widows, you'll be answerable to Allah on Judgment Day. You can't get away. You can't get away. Today in the Western world, the modern state calls it social security. Then Allah says the way in which you handle this problem is fankihu, marry, ma taba lakum, those who appeal to you, you like the parents. You never marry a woman without looking at her. That's not fair to her and not fair to you at all. You must look to her, because when you look at her, you don't need to do more than that. But by looking at her, you will know whether there is what we may call a chemistry. Because a man might be attracted to this woman and not to that. This one and not to that. And if you are not attracted to her, there's no chemistry between you. Not going to be a hollow marriage. A hollow marriage. There must be a chemistry. So you must look to her. وَتَابَ لَكُمْ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. So marry 2, 3, or 4. By marrying the widow, you will assume responsibility for the orphans. That's one way to understand the verse. The other way is to marry the orphan. But the orphan must be Nisa. The orphan cannot be a child. The orphan has to reach the age of marriage. And what is the age of marriage for a child? For a girl, we'll come to that later. مثنى وثلاث ورباع وإن خفتم أن لا تعدلوا فواحدة. And if you fear that you cannot maintain two wives with equity, you cannot lower the standard of living of the first wife in order to take a second one. That's not fair. Her standard of living must remain what it is. And then if you have the means, you can marry a second, but she must be maintained equally with the first. And if you fear you can't do that, most men can't do that. Most men can't do that in the age of riba. If you fear that you will not be able to fulfill the duty of equity, then stay with only one. But then the Quran goes on to say, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, meaning, if the problem cannot be resolved through nikah, because you don't have the means, then the problem can be addressed through milk al-yamin, where you do not have to maintain equally. You simply maintain the milk al-yamin to the extent that you have capacity to maintain. From this verse of the Quran, my favorite expression is 2 South African rands is all enough of common sense. That's all you need. That if Allah is giving men permission to marry 2, 3, or 4, and if in addition to 2, 3, or 4, you can also have a milk al-yamin, you don't need a PhD to then realize that it is he who chooses which child is a boy and which is a girl. That's his choice. And so clearly, since he's a wise God, and he's giving men permission to marry more than one, it must then indicate that the number of women born will always be more than the number of men who are born. Does anyone differ? Unless it is not Allah who decides which is a boy and which is a girl, but the government. If the government decides that is shirk, that is shirk. Okay? And this perhaps is one of the possible explanations for what is to happen in the end time. That our Prophet prophesied that in the end time, one man will have to maintain 50 women. And I have suggested possible explanations for this massive imbalance. But the one thing I have not said before is that perhaps the imbalance is divinely designed. The imbalance, massive imbalance, is part of divine planning. How are you going to solve that problem if you do not have divine guidance? Modern Western civilization says that monogamy, one man, one wife, is the way of morally upright people. And if you depart from monogamy, you're crooked. You're crooked. And when people accept that nonsense, now look at your prophet. Look at him. See how many wives he has. So he can't be a good man. He's crooked. That's the road on which we are now moving. And so part of the subject of femininity and masculinity is the divine imbalance between women and men and the necessity for plural marriages. And now we turn to Milk al-Yamin. And who is a Milk al-Yamin? Our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, received the gift of a slave woman from the Makakis of Egypt, the ruler of Egypt. Her name was Maria, and she was a Coptic Christian. So she's known as Maria Kupti. And he had a son with her. His name was Ibrahim. And the child lived until he was age 3 before he died. Did he ever have a contract of nikah with her? Answer? No. In order to have a contract of nikah with a slave, you must first free her. When she becomes a free woman, then you can only marry her on the condition of her consent. A woman cannot be married against her will. Not even the father and mother can force a marriage on a girl. Nobody can do it. If you force a marriage on a girl, that marriage contract is invalid. So he'd have to free her, and when she's a free woman, he then has to propose marriage to her. And when he does so, she can say, no thank you, I want to go back to Egypt. And then she has the right to deny him, to reject his offer, and say, I want to go back to Egypt. That never happened. So she remained a slave. So in what capacity did she become a wife? Because she's known as a wife. He said, you cannot marry her after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. No. So now, what is the status of Maria Kupti? Is she his wife, yes or no? Answer, no one denies that Maria Kupti was the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Well then, if she was his wife, how come there was no contract of nikah? Answer, she was a wife, but not a wife of nikah. She was a milk al-yamin. That is the answer. Good. Is this something granted exclusively to the Prophet? That only you and no one else can have a milk al-yamin? Who is that ignorant person who will declare such? Of course not. This is not exclusive to the Prophet. Hence, to have a milk al-yamin is sunnah. Does anyone differ? Tonight we have a small gathering, so we can chat, we can talk. You're not going to sit down tonight and say nothing. I'm not going to let you get away. Yeah.
Is it applicable today to have
Okay, the question is the sunnah is the Sunnah applicable today, or should we abandon the Sunnah? That's the question. We can't pick and choose from the Sunnah of the Prophet. No, because Allah says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. This is absolute truth in the Quran. Absolute truth is not temporary. Absolute truth is eternal. Absolute truth is not valid in one place and not another. Absolute truth is universally valid. Yeah.
Another question, if there is offspring from this marriage.
Now you're going ahead of the subject now. You're going ahead of the subject. I'm proceeding step by step because I'm a teacher. And we were talking about marry 2, 3, or 4. Which surah is this? Ali Imran, yes, Surah to Ali Imran. Marry 2, 3, or 4. But if you fear, you will not be able to act justly to your wives, then stay with only one. And then in that case, you solve the problem of the widows and orphans through the mechanism of milk al-yamin. And we had reached the stage where we were defining who is a milk al-yamin. And I have already offered you the evidence that Nabi Muhammad ﷺ had a milk al-yamin, and she was not a fly-by-night woman, she was his wife. She had the status of a wife. She was not a woman you keep in the dark like a rat. You know, rats like the dark. Rats like the dark, but men prefer the sunshine. There's a difference between a rat and a man. So he is not keeping this woman in the dark like a rat. No. She is recognized as his wife, but not a wife of nikah, a wife of milk al-yamin. Who was this? Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And so we said that this is the Sunnah. This is the Sunnah. And the Sunnah is eternally valid and universally applicable.
The verse that the Mutashabih is not interpreted verse.
What he said?
Is the verse muhkamat or mutashabih?
There is nothing unclear about this verse. Even only 2 South African rands of common sense is enough. Marry 2, 3, or 4. And if you fear that you will not be able to manage with equity, then stay with only one or your milk al-yamin. There's nothing to be interpreted here. Yes?
The verse of the Milk al-Yamin, is that a clear-cut verse?
The verse of milk al-yamin, is that also muhkamat?
But that's what I just said. I just said to you, even with only 2 South African rands of common sense, it is clear that this verse is plain in and by itself. That's muhkama. Shall I repeat it?
That's okay, it's a law.
Yeah. Good. So what's the difference between milk al-yamin and a wife of nikah? Answer: the difference between the milk al-yamin and the wife of nikah is, first of all, she's a slave. And she's a free woman. And our scholars point out that slavery is now abolished and illegal. And therefore they come to the conclusion, correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, the world of Islamic scholarship has come to the conclusion that since slavery is now abolished, it's illegal, about 15 verses of the Quran have now become obsolete and redundant and are now fit for cold storage. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Huh? About 15 verses of the Quran on milk al-yamin have now become obsolete. You know the meaning of obsolete? The old laptop you had can't be repaired anymore, it's obsolete. Gotta buy a new one. Redundant, no longer applicable, no longer valid. It's lost its validity. All these verses of the Quran. That is the prevailing view of contemporary Islamic scholarship. That's not my view. My view is that the Quran is absolute truth. Therefore, all verses of the Quran are eternally valid and universally applicable. Well then, how do you deal with the fact that slavery is now abolished and there are no more slaves? Answer, our prophet has prophesied that there is slavery in the end time. When did he do that? Help me somebody. Huh? When did angel Gabriel came? Jibreel alayhi salam, in the form of a human being. And he walked into the masjid. Are you familiar with it? Shake your head, let me hear you. Oh, there's some heads which are not shaking, eh? All right, so if you're not familiar, find out, ask somebody to tell you the story about the angel's visit. And he asked 5 questions. And the last question was, tell me about the alamat as-sa'ah, the signs of the last day. And the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, then gave 2. That the naked, barefooted shepherds would compete with each other in the construction of high-rise buildings. And the second one was that a slave woman will give birth to her mistress, not her master, her mistress. So there is slavery in the end time. In the language of law, they use some Latin terms. Sometimes they use French. Slavery de jure does not exist in the end time. De jure means legally. But slavery de facto, actual slavery, does exist. Because our Prophet prophesied it. The woman who gives birth to her mistress is a surrogate mother. She's not a slave in the legal sense of the word, but she's poor and helpless. And so she accepts the money to bear the baby, because that woman can't have a baby and the husband wants a baby. So Allah's messenger calls her a slave. So women who are in a similar situation, helpless because of circumstances, fall into that category of de facto slavery. De facto slavery. Helpless. And when one man has to maintain 50 women, then women are in a state of de facto slavery, helpless. They cannot find a husband. Impossible. So she's a slave woman. And when that time comes, when one man will have to maintain 50 women, this is the way in which the problem can be solved, through milk al-yamin. However, you do not have to maintain her equally with the wife. You simply maintain her to the extent that you have capacity to do so. Number one. Number two, if you have any children with her, like Nabi Muhammad had a son named Ibrahim, the children of the milk al-yamin have the same legal status, legal rights, as the children of the wife, of nikah. Number three, when you die, your wife of nikah would inherit from you. But your wife of milk al-yamin would not inherit from you. So there are many very rich men who are now looking for milk al-yamin because they're concerned about their wealth. And if I marry her, she immediately going to get part of my wealth. Okay? How can you have a milk al-yamin today? This should not be my subject at all. Have some pity on me. Have some pity on me. I should not have to solve all problems. Huh? I am specializing in Islamic eschatology. So why don't the scholars of law do their work and allow me to do my work? Instead, I have to now solve the problems of milk al-yamin. Everybody turn into me. Why? Because the scholars of Islam are silent on the subject. I have ventured to say only one thing and stop there. I am not going to prepare the contract. Yeah. I had women insisting, writing to me and insisting, you have to prepare the contract for us. You can do it. I have refused to do that. Let the scholars of law do that. What I have said is that since she is not legally a slave, she's a slave in the sense of being trapped in a world in which she's helpless. That's why we say you cannot solicit a milk al-yamin the way you can propose to a woman, I want to marry you. And if she agrees, or her wali agrees, then the nikah can take place. I have said it is she's the one who is in difficulty. She cannot get a husband. If she's an old woman, past the age of biological desires, maybe she can survive without a husband. When you're old, it's not the same. The tempest is not raging when you're old. Life is easier. But when you're young, the storm is blowing. The young ones. And if she cannot find a solution to her biological needs, which is halal, she will either end up in a mental hospital or on the road to hell, to Jahannam. Neither of these two solutions are fit for my daughters. I don't want to see my daughters like that, ending up in a mental hospital or on the road to Jahannam. So as a father, I have to look for my daughters a solution. So she is the one who will offer herself to a man of her choice. And if she chooses a garbage bin, well, then she'll pay the price. But if she's good and she chooses someone who is a morally upright person, a man who is already successful as a husband and a father, and she offers herself to him as a milk al-yamin, then and only then is he in a position to accept. But he is not going to solicit and ask her to become his milk al-yamin. This is only my opinion. In the event that she offers herself, what does he do? Answer, in the same way that you will marry a woman when you feel some chemistry, so too with the milk al-yamin. Not every woman would appeal to a man, no. But after that, you better have a good reason to say no. Because every woman has a right to a husband, but no man has a right to a wife. Every woman has a right to a husband, and every man has a duty to marry. This is a duty imposed by Allah on men. And if you don't marry, then you have to answer on Judgment Day if she goes astray. So it's your duty to marry. But you better have a good reason if you want to say, no, this happened to me. A woman in Britain who was an artist, a talented woman, and she offered herself as milk al-yamin to me. And for reasons which I prefer to keep private, I declined. And then after that, she began to show signs of instability in personality, unstable conduct. And then she died. Of course, I feel great pain and sadness in my heart for what happened to her. But I believe I took the right decision. I have no regrets in taking the decision that I took, for reasons which should remain private. Now then, if you turn her down, you better have a good reason to do it. All right? Because the consequences for her can be bad. Now then, when you marry her, it's a contract of milk al-yamin. Don't consider her to be a standby wife. She is your wife. She must have the status in the public as your wife. You must take her out in public and introduce her as your wife. The fact that she is your milk al-yamin is private between you and her. It's there in the contract. But that woman must have status in society. She must not be someone kept in the dark. This is a brief, I wish I had not spoken so long. My intention was to speak briefly. This is a very brief summary of what I lectured on 30 years ago, the philosophy of gender in Islam in Lahore, in Pakistan, And now after 30 years, I've returned to the subject. So now then, if you have any questions or comments, this is the interesting part of the evening. It's a pity we have so few sisters here tonight.
Did you write a book on the ship?
This subject is not a priority for me. The Quran and sacred time is more important for me at this time. The Quran and the crucifixion is more important for me at this time. There's several other topics more important than this one for me at this time. Yeah. Anybody?
If you say that the 15 verses are going to become obsolete, 15 verses on slavery, right?
I never said so.
No, it will. I mean, hypothetically speaking.
I said that is what they say, not me. They. Your world of Islamic scholarship, your Maulanas, Muftis, go and ask them. Go and ask them, can we have a Milk al-Yameen today? Ask them and get the answer.
Now, my question was, if it may be from a time base, it could be obsolete today, i.e. inapplicable. But there could be a time in the future, maybe another 1,000 years from now, when those verses will become applicable again. But for now, we have only one category of human. We don't have free people and enslaved people. So now we're going to create a category again to make those verses valid.
You have not traveled as much as I have traveled. I have had so many women in so many parts of the world come to me and tell me their stories. And sometimes I can't cry in their presence, but the tears flow afterwards because they are suffering so much. They need to get married, they can't find husbands. And you are telling me this is for the future. I'm telling you this is today already. I have several students of mine who have taken Milk al-Yameen and they're living happily. They're living happily, yes. And those women are not on the street. They're being taken care of. Yeah.
Can you do Milk al-Yameen without nikah?
If you do nikah, then she's no longer Milk al-Yameen. If you do a nikah with her, then she is no longer Milk al-Yameen.
If you're not married, you never make a nikah.
I just said to you, once you do nikah, then what is your question?
The question is, you're not in nikah.
You don't have a wife,
You don't have a wife in the first.
and you're taking a Milk al-Yameen
He hasn't
without
fulfilled.
having a wife.
If you do not have a wife and you want to take a Milk al-Yameen, then is it because you do not have the means to maintain her as a wife? Why are you taking her Milk al-Yameen? Huh? If you don't have the means to maintain her as a wife, you will not have the means to maintain her as a Milk al-Yameen, so you can't take her Milk al-Yameen.
See, the thing what you spoke about is like the inheritance. So if you have children with her, she has the legal status of any other child. If you are divorced and you have so if you're divorced and you don't,
Good.
you're supporting yourself.
Right. My answer to you would you kindly consult a mufti? Next question. Would you kindly consult a mufti? Next question. Don't come to me and expect me to answer all the legal questions. That's wrong. That's not fair on me. I am giving you the skeleton of the subject from the Quran. I don't have a duty to do beyond that. Don't expect me to do all the legal reasonings. I can't do that. I'm not a scholar of law. But I am a scholar of the Quran. And I do not accept that 15 verses of the Quran could be obsolete and redundant and fit for cold storage. Not me. Not at all. And if you say that we should not have milk al-yamin, you disagree, then would you kindly show 2 South African rands worth of integrity and tell me what is your solution when one man has to maintain 50 women? And of course, you're going to be silent because you have no answer. But you're still saying, I disagree. You have no answer, but you still say, I disagree. That's irrational. That's not the way people think when you have some common sense in your head. If you do not have a solution, then listen and consider this. Don't write it off. When you have a solution, then tell us. Tell us what's the solution. When one man has to maintain 50 women, if the women are old, no problem. But what about when the women are young?
You need to separate from milk yamin, whatever the is.
We need to separate from milk al-yamin.
If you separate from a milk al-yamin, you want to know now the law. You want me to spell out for you the law. That's what you want me to do. How are you going to have a divorce with a milk al-yamin? Imran, you got to study this subject. Spend the rest of your life studying this subject. Stay with you. Take your Islamic eschatology and put it away. And we want you to study this subject and only this subject. And do all the legal reasoning. Go and do a law degree. And then do what no mufti is doing. That's what you want me to do? I am not going to do that. I have done my duty. I have explained the Quran. Those who are legal scholars, scholars of law, they must now take over. But you can't find even one, not one, who is prepared to accept the view that milk al-yamin is still possible today. Not one. Yeah.
So in this end times, after Zaman, we are enslaved by the system. Most of the time, not our reasons, we were brought up like that. So, to go into, the whole system is working on, in South Africa, without the gold coins and we're using the paper money. So the system is enslaving us, and the ladies consequently. So, would that be taken as slavery?
I have come to the conclusion, in the winter of my life as a scholar, I have come to the conclusion that it's not possible. It's not possible for me to change that world of Islamic scholarship out there, that they will remain as they are. And therefore you will not have a solution to the subjects that are engaging us. 1 second. You will not find them offering a solution to the subject of money. What is money? What is the monetary system? And riba. Because they will not change. Not possible. So I have come to the conclusion that if there are graduates of a Darul Uloom or if there are students studying in a Darul who show an interest in this model of scholarship, then we reach out to them, as some of them have come to me in Britain, graduates of Darul in Britain. And we will welcome them and we'll try to teach them. But the rest, it is not possible to change them. At the same time, we are not going to wage war on them, because part of the work that they're doing is beneficial. When they teach the Arabic language in the Darul, that's beneficial, okay? So what we do is we try to create a new generation of scholars of Islam. And we need not start from in primary school. We need not start with primary schools and secondary school. We can take graduates, for example. There is a Salam in Durban, and there is Islamic College in Cape Town, and there's IPSA, Islamic Peace University in Cape Town, and you have so many Darul Ulooms. So we open our doors with an institute for what we may call postgraduate studies. And we attract these people who have already done work in studying Islam. And we design different kinds of courses. We design, for example, I don't need more than 1 year to teach Islamic eschatology. In 1 year, I will know whether you are fit or you are unfit. There will be some who will survive 1 year, and many who will not. All right? And in this way, we are able to produce scholars for tomorrow. And we can invite graduates of the Darul Uloom who are not hostile to us to come and join us and study with us. In this way, we might be able to produce a mufti tomorrow, who will be the mufti for today. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
So, Sheikh, we had breakfast Saturday morning. The gentleman from Bangladesh, he mentioned that there's a lot of colleagues, people moving around the world from Pakistan coming to South Africa and so on to earn a living. So they're unable to make nikah. So is it permissible for them to take a burqa, Yami?
He traveled all the way to Durban to ask me that question.
Yes.
I said to him, don't expect me to find a milk al-yamin for you. That's not fair. That's not fair. The answer is yes. In my opinion, milk al-yamin is still valid in the Quran, and I've just explained that to you. It is still valid in the Quran. But how do you implement it when you don't have any mufti? You don't have anyone who's accepting it's possible? How do you explain it? Only those who are my students and who accept my views, they are the ones who are taking milk al-yamin, and they're only few. So this fellow was coming to me to ask me to help him to find a milk al-yamin. That's not fair. And none of you should ask me, huh? All right? But if a sister, if she turns to me and says, I need a husband, either is nikah or milk al-yamin, then I have a duty to help that girl. I have a duty. I can't just turn her away. I have to now search to see who I can find. All right? Because that is a girl who turns to me and now ask me for help, I have to do something. Similarly, if they turn to you, you have a duty to help. Remember, every woman has a right to her husband, and no man has a right to a wife. Every man has a duty to marry, either nikah or milk, I mean. Okay, if there are no more questions, yeah.
So you said that about the widows, if you don't marry them, or if you don't, then it's a bad thing.
What's the question?
Said, if you don't marry the widows, you'll answer for the day of judgment.
If we don't marry the widows, we will be answerable on the day of judgment.
My own father married my mother. She was a young girl. She married at 15. And her husband died 1 year later. And she had a baby. And she went back to her parents' home and lived for 5 years as a widow. And my father said, if Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam can marry a widow with children, so can I. Because Indian people have a bias against widows. Yeah, they have a bias against widows, Indian people, maybe from Hinduism. And that's how my father married my mother. So yes, you have a duty to marry. She has a right to her husband. You have a duty to marry. What do you do if you choose to take another wife because she needs a husband and you have the means to maintain her? And your wife now says, I'm out of here. I want a divorce. What do you do? Tell me. Answer? Prepare yourself for the answer. This head must bow in submission to Allah, not in submission to anyone else. You must live for Allah. You must be prepared to die for Allah. Then you're a Muslim. So you submit to absolute truth and to nothing else but absolute truth. So if a wife says, I'm going to leave you if you take another wife, you say to her, I'm going to miss you. You say to her, I'm going to miss you. Yes. Your choice is not the best choice. And one day you regret it. The one who is living a life pleasing to Allah is the one who is successful. And your choice is not pleasing to Allah. Okay? If your children say, Papa, we're leaving you, you say, I'm going to miss you. All right? You must live your life in submission to absolute truth. When will you learn to do that? When? That's what the companions of the Prophet ﷺ lived. They lived for Allah. And therefore you had men with backbone. You had men with backbone. You have women today, who will say to their husband, this sister needs a husband, and my heart is bleeding for her. I suggest that you marry her. The woman will do that. Yes, women will do that. I can give you examples, but I don't want to do it. Okay, I think we've had enough for tonight. I I hope it will be a beneficial session.